Hello, this is Mr. Russell, your AP Biology teacher, and we're going to begin our study on chemistry basics, or biochemistry. Remember, bio meaning life, so life chemistry. So when we're looking at living organisms, there are a series of common elements that are going to show up in all life forms. Some of these are referred to as trace elements, and then the other ones are going to be the most common elements. So the most common elements in all life forms are going to be carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. The easiest way to remember those is by making the acronym CHNOPS, CHNOPS. Each of those letters being the first letter of the element for these common ones that are going to be found in living organisms. Now, I know that you see several other elements there on the screen, and when you're looking at those are just going to be occurring in very small amounts within living organisms. And when they occur in small amounts, those are going to be referred to as trace elements. Now, when we think about atoms, since this is going to be biochemistry, atoms are the smallest unit of matter that has chemical properties. And these chemical properties are because of it having subatomic particles. Now, if you go back and you remember your chemistry classes or other intro classes that may introduce these things, you'll remember that subatomic particles are just small parts that make up the atoms. Sub meaning below or lower. Think about like a subway, not like going down the street to your favorite restaurant, but a subway like the train that runs underneath the road. It runs below the road. Now, there are a few subatomic particles that you have to know here. When we think about these, we think about things like protons. And when we think about protons, well, they're going to be found right here inside the nucleus. They carry a positive charge, and the number of protons will never change in the element. So this allows the periodic table to be created because of this constant number of protons in each element. So if we think about this, well, we also have particles called neutrons. Well, these particles carry no charge, therefore they're neutral. They're also associated and located in the nucleus in the atom as well. So you can find those in here with the protons. Now, if you think about electrons, these carry a negative charge. You're going to hear a lot about electrons as we go through the course. You'll hear things about electron transport chain. We'll look at protons and proton pumps. We'll get there eventually. So these are located in what's called the electron cloud. This electron cloud is going to be right out here. So I think of this as kind of like a box fan or a window fan. Think about the motor part of that being where the protons and the neutrons are, and then the cloud, like the spinning blades. There's going to be out there where the electrons are. So this cloud is created because the electrons move at a speed of light, which creates basically a blur around the atom. Electrons are moving, which is called kinetic energy. This is why they're associated with energy in batteries. It is potential energy when they are bonded. We're going to talk about that more here in a few minutes. So when we think about the symbol for electrons, let's see if I can draw this on here for you. The symbol for electrons is going to be the lowercase e with a little negative sign up there because electrons are negative. I'm going to back up for a minute and then I'm going to build on this again. We think about kinetic energy and potential energy. Let's imagine that you've got a flashlight in your hand. Well, where is that energy stored? Well, it's going to be in the batteries, right? So there's energy locked in bonds inside the battery. Well, how does the light get out? Once you flip that switch on, it releases the energy, it releases those electrons to move through the wires to the bulb and back again to the battery and goes in a circle. Well, when it's being released and those electrons are moving through the wire, that is called kinetic energy. Because at that point the electrons are moving. Okay, now the number of electrons can change. Atoms with different numbers of electrons than the normal amount are often referred to as, or they are referred to as, ions. Okay, now if we think about molecules, molecules are two or more atoms that are bonded together. They may be the same type of atom, or they could be different. So here you're looking at oxygen. You've got one oxygen right here. Then you've got another oxygen right here. So now you've got these two that have bonded together. This would be O2. Now, if we look at this and we say that, well, it can be elements of the same thing, or it can be molecules of different elements bonded together. Here you see two hydrogens and one oxygen, H2O. What do you got? We got a little water here, right? So, now, if we think about energy, we just talked a little bit about potential energy and a little bit about kinetic energy. We think about energy, you're going to see this throughout this course, is you're going to be looking at the symbol, the uppercase letter E. Let me try to get that on there for you. Okay, now, that symbol E is going to represent energy. You're going to see that over and over and over again this course. So, you've got energy comes primarily from the rapid movement of electrons. Remember that lowercase e with a negative sign? We've got different types of energy. We just talked about potential energy. That's energy of position. Usually refers to electrons that are locked in a chemical bond. Those electrons were still in the battery when the light was off. It's just like a light switch on your wall. Once you turn that light switch to the off position, those electrons are locked. They're ready to be released, but they're in position and ready for movement. Once you flip it on, now you've released that energy, so energy is moving. Now you have kinetic energy. So these are electrons that can freely move about. Now, when we think about potential energy, it's oftentimes written as PE. Kinetic energy is often written as the uppercase K and then an E. Now, we've got energy levels. When we think about energy levels or electron shells, you're looking at, this is where the electrons or the energy is located within an atom or molecule. So adding energy to electrons make them move further out. Losing energy causes them to move further in. So if you look at your top arrows that are moving out, that would be energy that's going to be moving further away, so therefore it's gaining energy. So as it's losing energy, it's going to be, those arrows are going to be moving in. Now, we've got what's called a valence shell. This is where the outermost electrons are located on the atom. So these valence electrons refers to the outermost electrons. These are the most important for chemical bonds and the chemical properties of an element or molecule. Now here's another term. So we've got valence shell, we've got valence electrons. Valence just refers to the bonding capacity of an atom. It depends on the number of valence electrons that are available. And we think about different types of bonding. We've got, I jumped ahead here a little bit. So we've got, here we're looking at our valence electrons, where they can be found on the periodic table, depending on how many electrons are available. And as you can see, let's see if I can draw for you here. You've got, there. You look at these outermost shells. So hydrogen here only has one electron in its outermost shell. Helium has two, whereas neon is going to have 8. Now, what about carbon? How many does it have? How many electrons does it have in its valence shell? How many valence electrons are there? Hopefully you said 4, because that is the outermost shell. And you can see the dots. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. Now, what about beryllium, if I can say that one correctly? You've got 2. Boron, you have 3. So as you move from left to right across the periodic table, you can see that it would build accordingly. So group 1 elements here are going to have 1 electron in their outer shell. Group 2 are going to have 2, 3, so on and so on until you get to group 8 other than helium. Okay, so now let's look at bonding a little bit. Chemical bonds, these occur between elements or molecules. These are attempts to fill that outermost shell, valence shell, so that the molecule becomes stable. So if we think about covalent bonds, this type is going to be the strongest type of chemical bond. We talked about this yesterday or prior in our lesson before this. We're talking about nucleotides bonding together up that ladder. So if we look at this, we're talking about this results from sharing electrons between elements of molecules to fill both outer shells. They always create a molecule. Covalent bonds always create a molecule. So the size of the molecule may vary from element to element, or from bond to bond, I should say. 2 or more atoms together of any kind. Okay, so since we've talked about covalent bonds, and we're talking about how these are 2 or more atoms of any kind that are bonded together. In this case, you're seeing carbon and hydrogen. When we look at this, you can see that our carbon has bound to hydrogen in 4 different directions. So this is called a tetravalence. And this here, you've got 2 elements that have bonded together, and this will create methane. So we will talk about that one a good bit later as well. Now, we think about polar molecules. Remember about poles, the North Pole and the South Pole, right? Polar molecules can carry an electrical charge at the opposite poles, or the ends, just like our planet has poles, the North Pole and the South Pole. So, and then there's nonpolar molecules that do not have any electrical charge. If we refer to electronegativity, how electronegative is an element? So, well, what electronegativity is it refers to the element's or the molecule's desire to acquire or release electrons. Hydrogen is the least electronegative biological element. It wants to release electrons. Well, oxygen is the most electronegative biological element. It wants to acquire electrons. So in this case, you can see that these two are very easily bonded together. Forms water. Now, we think about structural formulas. How would you write these things? These are just used to show how the shape of the molecule is going to be representative. Now, molecular formula are used to tell the elements and the number of atoms in each and to make up the molecule. These are also known as the chemical formula. Now, another type of bonding that we're talking about, that was covalent bonding that we just looked at. Ionic bonding. These are fairly strong bonds while they are dry, but they're very weak in water, so they dissolve into ions. These bonds are created by swapping electrons between elements so that each element can fill its outermost shell. When dissolved in water, ions or charged particles are created. Think about Gatorade. It's an ion-loaded drink. Cations possess a positive charge because it has more protons than electrons. Anions possess a negative charge because it has more electrons than protons. Remember, an or a, against. These anions, they love water. And the reason is because water is a polar molecule too. So we think about these ionic bonds. A cation bonded to an anion will end up making salt when it's dry. Now, we think about hydrogen bonding again. Hydrogen bonds, fairly weak bonds. It's like a magnet. Positive hydrogen attracted to a negative substance, usually oxygen. These are the most important biological bonds. Also, when we refer back to our DNA and our RNA, it's hydrogen bonds that hold the two strands together. It holds your A and your T together, and your G and your C together. And we're going to see those a lot more coming up soon. Another type of interaction that you need to look at, or type of bond, is called a van der Waals interaction. These are temporary bonds, usually a fraction of a second, involves enzymes only, or mostly enzymes, I'm sorry. When you think about enzymes, if you remember, they speed up and slow down reactions. Remember, we compared that to the school bell. When the bell rings, that tells you to go to class. When it rings the second time, it lets you know you should be in your seat and ready to go. When it rings the next time, that means you're free to get up and take off to your next class. So, these interactions are created when electrons clump on one side of an atom, making that side temporarily negative, and the other side becomes positive, so that the charged particles can attach momentarily and then they unclump. Well, because electrons are moving and the interaction disappears because of the loss of the charge. Alright, that's all for this session on biochemistry and chemistry basics, and hope that helps, and look forward to seeing you guys in class.